Glad to see so many here. I hope the next meeting there'll be twice as many. But well done for coming out, especially since people with cameras, you know, anyone could find out who's here. So well done. Now the GCSB bill, simply put, will allow the GCSB and other agencies greater powers to spy on New Zealanders and intercept their communications. The GCSB already does a handful of low-key spying around the country every year, or with hefty restrictions on what they can check. You've already heard about the missing 88 people. So that gives you some idea of how many people are likely to be spied on at any one time. Now their powers are to be extended so they can watch more people more thoroughly with less scrutiny. Who decides who should be put under surveillance? You'd hope it would be some independent panel, but no, because suggestions that a panel be included as part of the legislation were outvoted by the government. Its mandate resting on one fence-sitting MP who struggled to find even 500 members for his own party recently. So you've got politicians and governments who will be able to decide which New Zealanders they spy on, and there will be very few restrictions. And of course, they'll be pressurised from their friends in big business and from friendly overseas government, all for the sake of terrorism. Friendly overseas government. Need I remind anyone here that the last time there was any terrorism in New Zealand, it was at the hands of a friendly overseas government. So they'll be tapping our phones, opening our mail and our email, following the websites we click on, reading what we write on Facebook and Twitter, listening into our conversations. Now let's imagine the preposterously unlikely case where we have an ideal, morally sound, unswayably independent government with an impeccably honest spy agency. And remember, by definition, spy agencies cannot be totally honest. It's their job not to be totally honest. Even then, there's still an old adage: good people with good intentions shouldn't make precedents for bad people with bad intentions. Can you guarantee that any future government, National, Labour, who knows, doesn't matter, a future spy chief maybe, or a major superpower overseas, or a multinational, they won't have their own agenda? Because if they do, we're just one step away from a police state. Well, it'll only be a few New Zealanders, won't it? Not that many. Well, let's consider the equivalent situation in the United States. According to the Washington Post, there are 117,000 currently active surveillance targets in the United States. 117,000. Scale it down to New Zealand's size, and we're not looking at 88, we're looking at 1,500 or thereabouts active targets at any one time. Of course, exactly how many Kiwis are spied upon would remain hidden. I mean, after all, there are some things that the government wants to keep secret and private and not have spied upon, right? Now, a lot of people are saying, those with nothing to hide have nothing to fear. That's a very popular political saying. It's perhaps most famously used by the Nazi propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, by the way. You know how that turned out. But what about those people with nothing to hide? What if they're just falsely accused or just suspected of an offence? That could be anyone. It could be anyone here. It could be anyone walking down the street now. Could be suspected and therefore spied upon. In any case, who's to say what in future will be regarded as suspicious enough behaviour to spy upon? Have you ever made an offhand disparaging comment about a politician or a multinational, say on Facebook or somewhere? Have you ever donated to a potentially subversive group? And that could be anyone from Greenpeace to Amnesty International. Have you ever, oh the humanity, illicitly downloaded a song or video? Have you ever clicked on a porn website? Have you ever been an opposition political candidate? Are any of your acquaintances known criminals? Have you ever been in a trade union? Have you ever relied on social welfare? Are you gay? The wrong skin colour? The wrong religion? Do you associate with anyone who falls into any of those categories? Or perhaps you just simply made some enemies in a position of authority somewhere. Spying invades privacy. It also demeans, degrades and violates our self-respect. Next time someone says they've got nothing to hide, ask them whether they've got a door on their bathroom or curtains on their bedroom windows. If they do, there's clearly some things they aren't happy sharing with the world, and that's perfectly natural. We all have things we'd rather keep to ourselves. They don't have to be illegal. They may just be things we want to keep private for reasons of dignity. And anyway, there's never been a breach of privacy in New Zealand with data being accidentally leaked, has there? As the ad down there says, yeah, right. So, we've got new rules supported by the slimmest of margins in Parliament. And all the left-wing liberal crazies are up in arms about it, so says John Key. The people are on my side, he says. Opponents are simply playing politics, he says. Okay, let's see who opposes it. The Human Rights Commission, the Privacy Commission, the Law Society, the Legislation Advisory Committee. Yes, even the people who advise the government on what changes need to be made before bills become law has publicly come out to voice their concerns. At least part of the problem for them is that the new bill, as it stands, contravenes the United Nations International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which the Kiwi government ratified in 1978. This is what the Human Rights Commission had to say in their submission. The New Zealand public will not and should not have to accept that the sacrifices New Zealanders have made for freedom, democracy, the rule of law and human rights, such as freedom of speech, are now to be protected by a standard so low as if you have done nothing wrong, you have nothing to fear. I'll leave you with a famous comment by a very wise man, one of the true champions of liberty, Benjamin Franklin. Any society that would give up a little liberty to gain a little security deserves neither and will lose both. It's up to us to stop that happening. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Don't be put off if you hear sirens and hecklers. This is to make us feel nervous. I'm a nana and no one makes me feel nervous about standing up for my grandchild. Sorry for shouting, guys, but I'm a passionate nana and I have all the time in the world to put this bill to rest. I'm a volunteer, by the way, so money isn't in my, it's not on my horizon, unfortunately. I'm pleased to see people are signing our action text tree. Please do that. Notice that it's paper and that will be protected with our lives. You don't have to put your name, just put the phone number if you like. And we'll try to make sure that when we send you the message for action, it isn't scary. It's from us. Okay, I'd like to now welcome Labour MP Claire Curran.
I am your representative from the southern side of Dunedin. I acknowledge David Clark, the Labour member for Dunedin North, who couldn't be here today, and David Parker, Labour's finance spokesperson, who's in the audience here. Let me be very clear. Under a Labour government, this GCSB bill, this GCSB law will go. Before it goes, on day one of the new government, we will initiate a full independent inquiry of the GCSB, what it does, how it does it, what its powers are and what it has access to. We will ask whether those things are being done well, whether they are the right things to do and whether they cross the boundaries within which a democratic, peaceful nation should cross. We will investigate those things and we will change the law based on that inquiry. We will be transparent. We will ask the hard questions. We will require independent oversight because you need honesty, not secrecy. This government has made us a surveillance state. Those who say totalitarian are not scaremongers. They are not hysterical. This is real. Dame Anne Salmond, New Zealander of the Year, said on Thursday, she called it electronic McCarthyism. She's right. The head of the Law Society has spoken out strongly against expanding the powers of the GCSB, as has the Human Rights Commission, the Privacy Commission, and all of the major telecommunications companies, Facebook, Google, and even Microsoft have said that the GCSB is being given too much power. The Prime Minister is being given too much power. They don't want it. You don't want it. New Zealanders have lost confidence in the GCSB. All of those prominent New Zealanders and those prominent organisations have made the point that this state does have the right to protect us through lawful and responsible surveillance. But this law is not responsible. It's gone way too far. John Key says you're all wrong. He says all of those organisations, all of those people are wrong. He won't listen. Why won't he listen? Because he's doing someone else's bidding. The government and John Key have not made the case for change. They have not been able to show why we need it. In fact, they've refused to show us and to tell us that there is a threat to New Zealand that requires urgent legislation to be rammed through. John Key is pushing through legislation that the people of New Zealand just do not want, which widens the powers of the GCSB and gives him more personal power to spy on his own citizens. His law allows the GCSB to get their hands on all of your emails, your phone calls, your text messages, your Facebook and Twitter posts, and your private messages. Do not believe them when they say that everything needs a warrant. Right now, your data is able to be captured by the PRISM technology on our own international cable, which connects us to the US. The Australians have revealed that they agreed to let their major telco, Telstra, agree to the US demands to capture all of their data. Why would New Zealand be any different? John Key won't tell us if it's already happening. But the GCSB bill will allow the GCSB to lawfully collect metadata without a warrant. There are two laws going through the Parliament right now, as you've heard. The GCSB bill and the TICS bill, the Telecommunications Interception Capability and Security Bill. That bill provides the legal mechanism for the GCSB to require the telcos, the network operators, to hand over the data. It gives them huge powers to make decisions about the changes that network operators want to make. It gives huge powers to the Prime Minister to decide whether Kim Dotcom's company Mega can continue to operate in New Zealand or not. Yes, it does. I sit on that select committee. We are expected to make this law with no information from the GCSB or the security agencies about why it's necessary. None. We're making the law blindfolded, and we won't, Labour won't support it. Just whose bidding is John Key doing? Why is he doing it? What is the deal? What will he get in return for selling your privacy, for selling your basic rights? What has happened to our proud nation, which could hold its own, to hold its head high on the international stage, on nuclear testing, on being a peacekeeping nation, on being an independent nation on foreign policy? We have become a lapdog, the Chihuahua nation that yaps in obedience to whichever master commands it. Well, we won't put up with it, will we? You won't put up with it. On Thursday night, Anne Salmond demanded that politicians show some spine. Well, here I am, and here is the Labour Party. We have opposed this law from day one. David Shearer has opposed this law and has opposed John Key from day one. We oppose the TICS bill, which goes alongside it and gives the GCSB bill the powers to get inside your phone, your iPad, your computer and watch what you're doing, to get inside your networks and block them from making decisions. You are not doing anything wrong. You should be left alone. unless a judge agrees there is a good cause to authorise surveillance based on evidence. There is no case for change. The government won't tell us why. We know that there are security threats. We know we need protection and a strong set of agencies that are working in the national interest. But what John Key won't do is admit that the national interest is the public interest. The public has lost confidence in the GCSB. The public don't believe John Key. It's bleeding obvious that the day that the FBI and our police raided Kim.com's house on the 20th of January 2012 was one of New Zealand's greatest days of shame, alongside the Springbok tour and the police bashings that followed. On Wednesday this week, members of the US Congress voted 217 to 205 to let the NSA use PRISM, keep using PRISM to spy on Americans and possibly us. Those who voted to keep those powers received twice as much campaign finance from the defence and intelligence industry as those who voted against it. This is what has happened to politics. The law has been bought again. In our country, Peter Dunne has sold out. John Key and his government have sold us out again. People, if you want things to change, if you want a free and democratic society, if you want a country where Kiwis can stand proud and independent on foreign policy, if you want a country where our kids come first, where a decent job that pays a decent wage comes first, where being able to afford a warm, dry house and pay your bills comes first, where regional New Zealand is not put second to the one big city, where more gambling outlets are not put above addressing the serious social harms of problem gambling, where our kids will leave school and have a job to go to in this country, where your privacy is respected and honoured in law. You know what to do. We need to change the government. You each have a vote. Use it wisely. Kick this rotten government out.
Thank you, Claire. Claire is the only MP that was able to come here, and that's because of the short notice. So when we gather together, I think September the 1st is the next time, we will endeavour to have a bigger muster so we can hear everybody. But thank you, Claire, for those strong, definite words. We really hope Labour means them, please. I'd now like to welcome Chris LeBreton, who leads the Agents of Change Symposiums, both internationally and within New Zealand.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. I may sound like a Pom, but I have a bit of a global accent, and if I speak too fast or I mumble, which I can, please raise your hands. I've chosen to live in Aotearoa, New Zealand, because of its long tradition of championing freedom. And I've got 5 points. Firstly, a comment about mass surveillance. It thwarts initiative, it curtails creativity, and it is not good for making quality jobs either. Our parents and grandparents fought to defend freedom in the First and Second World Wars. Just remember that, John Key. I lived as a kid in Eastern Europe for a few years during the communist era, and I remember my parents couldn't speak candidly or openly to each other at home, given that there were bugs inside the house and at the British Embassy, and we had dark cars following us in the evenings and in the day. Later, as a young man working for the European Union, program to bring technical assistance to Russia and the former communist countries, we were championing freedom and self-determination there. And in those countries where there had been mass surveillance, I remember as a young man noticing how many people appeared to have no open critical thought, and they did not ask questions of authority or questions about things around them, such as why is a factory polluting a river? The result was lots of inept bureaucracy, shoddy standards, and environmental pollution. Secondly, why do we need this mass surveillance? Why do we need it? What does our government need to spy on us for? We the people, we the whānau, the hapu, the iwi and the tangata, we have our say. What really are the risks? This is in violation of our New Zealand values, and it infringes the freedoms we were born with and that our forefathers died for. This injects division. It infects society with suspicion and fear, and it breeds distrust. You will have heard Dame Anne Salmon say yesterday, democracy trusts the people, dictatorship does not. Thirdly, why the rush? This is being pushed for under urgency through Parliament and without due process for the necessary public discussion. New Zealand is held in high regard around the world as a champion of democracy and liberty. The Human Rights Commission, the Law Society, Internet NZ have all come out and strongly criticised this bill. Of the 127 submitters, only one was in favour, saying that should the unrest in the Middle East, should the unrest over there spread here, he thought the government would need the tools to crush any uprising. Aha! So they are in fear, and this is their plan. Are they expecting unrest? From what I've seen and heard, and from people who have spoken to me, this bill has no public support. Fourthly, we need to remind our MPs that we put them to Parliament to represent us, not to rule us. So I challenge all members of Parliament to state in clear, unequivocal language that they will repeal the law at the first opportunity. Will they absolutely commit to do this? Not just qualify with statements, conditional and weak, about a policy review. We don't want any politicians hiding under policy spin and wish-wash. Fifthly, and finally, here is a poem from the American poet, Drew Denninger. It's 3:23 in the morning, and I'm awake because my great-great-grandchildren won't let me sleep. My great-great-grandchildren ask me in dreams, what did you do while the planet was plundered? What did you do when the earth was unraveling? Surely you did something when the seasons started failing, as the mammals, reptiles, and birds were all dying? Did you fill the streets with protest when democracy was stolen? What did you do once you knew?
Thank you, Crystal Breton. Hey, I've just had it pointed out to me that we've been standing under cameras here. I'd like you all to turn and look at the cameras and give the GCSB a big wave, and I'm going to blow a kiss.
That's DCC.
My name is Vivian Ann Adams, and I will stand up until this bill is tossed out. Our next speaker is Ben Vidgen. Ben is former Army. He's a published writer. His books include State Secrets and State Secrets 2. Now I want to read those.
Good afternoon all. I'd also like to say that I also do a show on Radio 1 on Sundays, The Postman Show. Over the last couple of months I've interviewed a couple of very interesting guys. One was Walter McIntosh, who worked for the CIA for 20 years, and the other one was Glenn Carl, who also worked for the CIA for over 20 years. In fact, will be on my show in about 2 or 3 weeks from now. These gentlemen are probably about two of scores and scores of people I've met over my life who worked in the intelligence service and the security forces. And what I find quite interesting is the response I get when talking to these gentlemen about their approach to this bill, and they give me about 6 reasons why they think that the GCS bill is basically an affront not just to New Zealand's sovereignty but to our national security. The first one is, well, where's the threat? As James pointed out, the only sort of real act of terrorism that we had is from the French government, our friends, when they blew up the Rainbow Warrior in 1987. Of course, the other sort of threat that we have at the moment is from the destabilisation of the Pacific caused by private military contracts, companies who operate in places like Fiji, the Solomons, and the PNG. Now, what's interesting about this is you don't actually need a GCS bill or a surveillance tool to prevent this. There is, in fact, the legislation in Parliament at the moment, in the third reading of the anti-mercenary bill, which would actually prohibit this from actually happening. Yet National won't actually turn around and put that through its third reading because it obviously affects their powers in big business. So that's the first reason. The second reason basically is this goes against the basic principles of checks and balances that occur in any security apparatus as a standard operating procedure. In other words, you don't have your intelligence service agency both spying on your domestic as well as your foreign powers, because this creates a centralisation of power which leads to natural abuse, which is something that my grandfather, Major Robinson Cox, fought 4 years in World War II to prevent. And I find it quite ironic because my grandfather was also a staunch national voter and he would not be supporting this bill at all if he was around today. The third thing about this bill is it actually hands power over to a foreign power, and at this stage what we really need to be doing is looking at the bill in terms of the greater picture, in terms of, first of all, if you read books like Nicky Hager's Secret Powers or John Pilcher's many of his books, because he goes into this in several extensions, or even you read the US Embassy's own cables via WikiLeaks, you'll discover that the GCSB's chief facilities are in fact controlled not by professional New Zealand intelligence officers who are loyal to the country of New Zealand, but they are in fact operated by officers of the National Security Agency, which is of course a US spy agency. In fact, they are part of the Department of Defence, and they would not be able to do this back in the United States because it would actually breach our own laws, but hey, we can do it here. The other aspect of it is the context, is that 2 things happened in 2007 that were of significance. The first one is in Otago House in Auckland. There was a symposium that was held and it was chaired by the US New Zealand Chamber of Commerce and attended by a who's who of the intelligence community, titled Taking Back the Internet. And it made it very, very clear that the idea was to basically make the internet a tool of big business and to enforce their monopolies. So again, this is not about national security, this is about vested interests.